You're listening to the Custom Built Podcast. In today's episode, we're discussing going after all of it. So stay tuned. If you're not going after all that you desire, then what are you doing? And I ask this because this comes from this time of year for me is a big reflection time. And it's not because it's coming up to the holidays when we're grateful and we're looking back on the rest of the year. I mean, that's definitely part of it. But, the fall, Mother Nature is literally shedding to make space for new growth come the spring. And, in the fall is a time that makes me reflect more. My birthday is in the fall, so I love to look back and think about my year as what I've accomplished, what I've done, how I've grown, and maybe things that I didn't love and want to focus and forgive myself for. And, just reflection of, my dad passed in the fall and just thinking about life and what that means as, we grow and we live each day. And so this isn't supposed to be this big, heavy episode, but I do want to make this an episode of reflection and thinking about how we're showing up intentionally in our lives, in our homes, and the people around us. And I talk probably about our intentions a good bit and what that means when you're thinking about your design of your home. But also, let's think about this in the design of your life. If you're not paying attention and you're not present to what's happening each day and really setting intentions, what does your day look like? And what would it look like if you were to stop and give yourself a little bit of time in the morning to give yourself that moment to think about your intentions for the day? I wake up early every morning to meditate and, show my gratitude and to set my intentions for the day. And since I've started this practice, not only has it made me more aware and thoughtful throughout my day, but I find that I actually will make more conscious decisions throughout. And if I find myself kind of drifting and making decisions that don't necessarily align with that intention, I actually catch it a little bit more and I think about it and then I reflect on it. And I've been just having a ton of conversations lately. And again, like the reflection of just what like life looks like and death. And again, I'm not trying to be morbid, but it's true. And it puts into perspective what time we have here on earth and how we're living our life and what does that look like? And are we working towards our highest potential all the time? And obviously, you can't just grind always. You have to rest too. But that is also getting you to your highest potential, that rest as well. So when I'm saying, are you every day making conscious decisions to get to your better self or, that next level of you? That doesn't mean you need to push. This isn't like push, push, push to get to what you need. This is push and rest and recover and go when it feels good and stop when you need to. And sometimes that looks like a stumble back and we get into old patterns and instead of beating ourselves up, recognize that we figured it out sooner than later and we course corrected. And maybe that looks like things in your life have changed too. So, I was talking with a friend about expectations and things that didn't go in the way that, we might have expected it to. So if we started creating this life when we had expectations and we pictured this future for ourselves and our families, and it ends up not being a reality for us and things shifted and changed, what do you do at that moment? Do you push and try to get that vision back? Do you hold on to it as tight as you can? Or is it something that you need to look at and process and grieve and understand that what you thought and what you expected is not what will be the reality? And, I was talking to my friend and having this conversation specifically, and I asked him, you know, or I said, after you grieve and process, think about how much that could open up for you, and open up the possibilities of something you had no idea was even available for you, and something that might be even better than what you were trying to hold on to. And I think that just kind of put a lot of things in perspective. It's not like this is something I think about often, but in that moment, I was like, whoa, like this is true. This is true for a lot of things and things in my own life, and like grieving things that we hold on to. And, when I was like a young teenager, I had these visions of what I would do when I grew up and got older, and, what I thought I'd be, and which was an interior designer. And I thought that was what I was going to do. And I thought I was going to open up a home goods line and like sell a whole bunch of stuff and just like kill it in the market. And as I grew and experienced life and took different turns and journeys and everything, I quickly realized that that was not the path I needed. And, the path I took was the path that was needed, even though I didn't see that clearly. But there's a grieving moment when you have expectations and you have, your sight set on something and it doesn't come to fruition. And even with my daughter, I'm recognizing that she is having a hard time with expectations too. So it could be something as simple as moving up her violin lessons. She normally goes at one time, and I had changed her class a little earlier to accommodate our night, and that was really hard for her. She got really upset, and she's like, I really like it at this time, and I had switched it last minute, and I didn't give her that time to process and grieve. I just told her, this is what we're doing, this is the new time, let's go, let's get ready. And I think about how if I paused in that moment and gave her a little bit of space to just acknowledge that, she had this expectation and she was ready for that, and then I changed it, or, it shifted, that she could have had a moment to do that. And what would she have learned in that time that, something shifted for her and her expectations weren't going to be met? And something simple like that. And I know that sounds so basic, but it was a big deal for her. And think about things that make our lives, they might seem basic, but if you have an expectation, or, an expectation that, and then it doesn't come to fruition, and then what? We're disappointed, but how do we process that? And then what? And what if it's something bigger? Again, like, deaths and marriages and divorces, and what our family life would look like, and then the change of what it actually is, and our homes, even like the way that our homes change and shift, and things are going to happen throughout our lives, and how are we addressing them? And the question is, are you living with more intention, or are you moving with the flow? So are you able to adjust when things are shifted? Are you intentionally making decisions, even if it's not exactly what you want at that moment? Are you still trying to reach it? So maybe you're in a different home than you thought you would be at this point in your life. Are you making the best out of the home that you're in right now? Are you bringing whatever you can to make it feel like you're closer to your purpose and what you want and desire in your life? Or are you looking at it as is your energy around it more like, this isn't what I want, I'm not as far as I should be, and this is what I have to show for my life right now? Like, is it more of a negative connotation to it, instead of this focus on what can I do to get me to my desire? And I think it's an important conversation to have with yourself and really think about, because again, it's this time of reflection at this time of year, especially when we think about the end of the year coming. We're only we're less than 10 days from December when I'm recording this. And so we're only a few weeks until the end of this year. And what do we all do typically at the beginning of each year? We create these resolutions. We look back in the year and we think forward and what we want to see our year to come. And sometimes it's like the best year we've ever had. And then other years you're getting thrown curveballs and really getting tested. And what does that mean for you if you're just passively flowing through life without making intentional decisions and intentional moves through each day? And when, what does that look like for you? And what does it look like if you are making more intentional moves? What's the difference? Have you experienced that? And when I was coming up with this episode, I really was thinking it would be something more along the lines of, if you're not doing everything that you love, if you're not going after what you want, then what the fuck are you doing? And that energy felt good in a way, but it also kind of felt like a little abrasive. But I say that with so much love. Like, what the fuck are we doing if we're not trying and we're not going after everything that we desire, And if you're not living for you, if you are making choices for others, if you're making choices for what should be and what's right, or, not necessarily what's right, but like the shoulds, the woulds, the coulds, like I'm talking very specifically about that. Like, who is to say what should or shouldn't when it's your desire and what you're looking for? And if something isn't working for you, what are you ignoring it, or are you taking the time to really think about it? And it's kind of back to that intuition that we tend to ignore and not pay attention to when we should be trusting that way more. And I know I just said the should word, but it's true. The lack of trust that we give ourselves because of either outside invalidation or, societal ways of telling us that we're wrong when we know internally that we're right, is tough to come back from and tough to trust, because we're taught that things can be selfish and things are not okay when you choose to listen to your intuition. And sometimes that intuition is telling you mostly that something's not right for you. And in something's not right for you, that doesn't necessarily mean that you're taken away from somebody else or that you're harming somebody else on purpose. And by harming, I don't mean harm like physically or emotionally. I mean, like, you might hurt somebody's feelings, but those are their feelings to deal with. They're not yours. And it's not your responsibility to manage someone's feelings around your decision. And if your decision is made out of love for yourself and for others, then there's no way that what you did was is harmful. And I think we're taught that if we do make decisions that seem selfish, then they're harmful to other people. But really what's happening when we ignore that and we stick to things that no longer serve us, that are not helping us grow and thrive, then we're harming ourselves. And I know this was a recent episode, but if you cannot take care of yourself, then you cannot help others. And you cannot fill anybody else up when you are drained. And it's not selfish, is the bottom line. And so our lives are always going to have shifts and changes throughout our whole lives, right? Like that's inevitable. It's always going to change and shift. But the one thing that we can always control is how we handle it and how we move. And what I'm asking of you, listener, is to really take inventory of how you handle those moments. If you're living for you, if you are actively engaged in your life, or are you kind of just going with the flow and seeing like where you're going in this? I think that just made me think of another thing. Like, what about like when opportunities show up in front of you and things that seem like crazy and like outlandish? Are you shutting it down, or do you try to explore it? And do you explore it with curiosity and maybe some wariness and caution? Or are you just, two sheets to the wind and just all in? Or are you running the other direction? And I think there is a balance there, but I think I was kind of on the dreary part, like things are going to change and shift and bad things might happen, and that might be true. But what about the opportunities that show up in front of you? Do you run with them? Do you trust yourself to follow through and figure out if it is an opportunity, or if it's something that's going to change your life forever for the best? Or are you too afraid to find out? And so my question, I'm going back to that, is what do you do in these moments? And what does that look like? What does your day-to-day look like? Are you moving each day with intention? Are you making choices that will align with who you are becoming? Are you able to adjust to things that are, expectations that you had that are no longer reality? Are you able to process and grieve, or process and move on? And are you able to see opportunities when they are in front of you? And are you able to take chances? Or are you kind of like a cog in the wheel of our day to day and just moving with what we think is a purpose, but there's not a lot of conscious effort there? And what does that look like in your home? Do you see that being reflected in anything that, things that you can change physically too? So, a lot of this is kind of like internal self work, but how does that look in your daily, like physical world for you too? So let me know what you think. Let me know your thoughts on this. I would love your input. I want to hear how you are either moving as a active participant in your life and processing and taking the opportunities as you see them and adjusting when things don't go the way you expected. And I also would love to hear from anyone who is having a realization that maybe they've been a little bit more passive in their journey. I have been very passive in my life in the past. And there's no shame in if you realize that you've been a little bit passive in your life. This is an invitation to take inventory and reflect and maybe shed some of that and make some space for growth, new growth coming. And that's what I got for you this week. Hope you have a wonderful, beautiful day. I'll catch you next time. Thank you for hanging out today. If you liked what you heard, please make sure you hit subscribe, and I hope to see you again next week. Have a good one. Bye-bye.